Hello, this is Clover, and I'm doing something a little bit unusual with this video today. I'm going to walk through a puzzle that I created a couple of months ago called Ouroboros. And this is not a genuinely approachable Sudoku. In fact, it is a very challenging Sudoku. But I've had a couple of questions about this puzzle, and I think it has an interesting story as well as an interesting solve path. So I'm going to talk about it a bit today. This is a quadruple Sudoku. We have standard Sudoku rules, meaning that we're placing the digits 1 through 9 once each in each row, each column, and each 3x3 region. Quadruples clues tell us that the digits in each circle have to appear at least once in the 4 cells immediately surrounding that circle. So for example, we have a 1 and a 3 in this quadruple. So we have to place at least one 1 and at least one 3 in these 4 cells somewhere. This puzzle, hands down, was the single most technically challenging and single most time-consuming individual Sudoku I have ever set, by a long shot. It took me something like 40 to 60 hours of work to make this work, and at the end of the day, I'm not completely convinced that I feel it was successful. That said, this is a positive story. I found a lot of joy in creating this puzzle. I learned a lot from creating it. And I think that it is interesting to talk about, perhaps more interesting to talk about than it is to solve, which is why we are here talking about it today and why a few people have asked me to talk about it a bit. So here's how we solve it. So we have 5 digits that we can get more or less immediately. We have 2 quadruples that both contain 5s in this region, so we're going to place a 5 at the overlap. There's a 1 in one of these cells, so the 1 in this quadruple has to be outside of this region, so it goes here. This quadruple also contains a 1, so the 1 must go there. To put a 1 in this quadruple, this is the only cell that isn't seen by this one, so we have to put it here. With 2s, we have a 2 somewhere in these 3 cells for this quad. That places a 2 into one of these 2 cells for this quad, and because this quad contains a 2, it has to go exactly here. In this quad, the only cell that's not already seen by a 2 is this one, so we're going to place a 2 here. And take note that this 2 sees this cell, so there's going to be a 2 in one of these. This is where a number of people reported to me that they gave up. So let's go off into the wilderness together, shall we? Take a look at the bottom right quadruple. I'm going to highlight in orange, or the bottom right ring of quadruples. I'm going to highlight in orange all of the cells that are touched by at least one of these bottom right quads. These are 20 cells. There are 8 quads, each containing 2 digits. All of those digits refer to distinct digits in the grid. We know that because none of the quadruples that overlap each other reference equal digits. This 6 and 7 cannot be referred to by this clue or by this clue because this one only refers to 4 and 8. Even though, for instance, these 2 quads both refer to 7 and 9, because these quads don't physically share any of the same cells, we know that they're referring to 2 different 7s and to 2 different 9s in the grid. So between them, the 16 digits that are referenced in these 8 quadruples clues are definitely referring to 16 distinct digits in distinct cells in the grid. None of those digits are being referred to twice because there isn't any overlap in digit clues between overlapping quadruples. So what we have is 16 digits that we can account for in these 20 orange cells, which is not great. We have to do better. So these 2 2s tell us that 2 is in one of these orange cells. And 2 can't be double counting one of the quadruple clues that we've already looked at because none of the quadruple clues that touch those cells have a 2 in them. So we know the 2 has to be an additional digit. So now we're up to 17 digits in 20 cells. These 1s place a 1 in one of these 3 orange cells. So now we're up to 18 digits in 20 cells. We know that that 1 is not just double counting because none of the quads that overlap those count a 1. So the 1 has to be an additional, I'm going to call it a bonus digit. So we're up to 18 digits accounted for in 20 cells. We still have a couple degrees of freedom to get rid of. The next thing to notice is that 1 has to be in one of these cells by Sudoku. I know that this one isn't orange, but just bear with me. And because there are 3s in both of these quads, these rule 3 out of all of the other positions in rows 3 and 4. We have accounted for the 2 3s in those 2 rows using these quads. Therefore, there's not a 3 in any of these cells. So 3 also has to go into these 6 cells. Similarly, we have 2s here and here. 2 is going to go down here in these orange cells. And we have 2 quads both containing 4. That removes 4 from all of these cells. 4 now has to go down here. So we now have 3 bonus digits up here, 3 bonus digits here. So that's a total of 6 bonus digits. None of them are referenced by any of these quadruples clues, so we know they have to be new digits that we haven't accounted for yet. There's no 1, 2, or 4 in these quads. There's no 1, 2, or 3 in these quads. Okay, so that's 6 bonus digits plus the 16 original digits referenced by the quadruples clues. That's a total of 22 digits. We originally had 20 orange cells, but let's just go ahead and add these 2 cells. We now have exactly 22 orange cells, and we have 22 digits that we have accounted for between the quads clues and our bonus digits. And that is where we get to start making deductions. We know now that every single digit that is in any of these orange cells has to be either one of the digits that comes from one of the quads, or it has to be one of these 6 specific bonus digits. We can't put any other digits into any of those cells. So there are a few cells that become very restricted. This cell, for example. This is not touched by any of the quads. Our bonus digits down here are 1, 2, and 4, but this cell cannot contain a 1 or a 2. Therefore, this is our 4. That's the only digit we get immediately, but we also get some other really interesting stuff. This cell has to contain a digit that is either a bonus digit or is referred to by one of the quads. It can't be a bonus digit because we know that all 6 bonus digits are in these 2 regions, region 6 and region 8. Down here, all of our digits must be referred to by quads. Therefore, this digit is either 1 or 3. This digit, similarly, is either 8 or 9, because both of these are only contained in a single quadruple. Up here, this cell can't be a bonus digit, because all the bonus digits are over here and over here. It isn't in any other quad beyond the 7, 9 one, so it must be a 7 or 9. For the same reason, this must be a 3 or an 8. This cell isn't touched by any of our quads. It must be a bonus digit. So it's 1, 2, or 3. There's a 2 in the row already, and that is a 1 or 3. Let's get to some more interesting deductions using that idea now. So, all of the digits in these orange cells have to be referred to by one of these 4 quads. This 6, 7, this 1, 3, this 8, 9, this 5, 6. That means there are actually 2 digits that can't be in any of these cells, because there are no 2s and there are no 4s in those quads. So the 2 and 4 in this region have to go into these 2 positions. But we placed a 4 a moment ago, so this is now our 2, this is now our 4. This has an interesting effect on this cell. It tells us that this can no longer be a bonus digit, because the quote-unquote bonus digits in this region can only be 1, 2, and 3. Well, we have a 1, 3 pair and a 2 in the column. So that's not a bonus digit, so it must be referenced by a quad. The only quad that touches it is the 6, 7 quad, so this is a 6 or a 7. Similarly, this cell can't be a bonus digit, can't be a 1 or 3, so it can't be referenced by this quad, thanks to the 1, 3 pair in the column. So it has to be a 6 or 7. It has to belong to this quad. And that is really, really interesting because that lets us start filling things in. This cell has to be referenced by a quad. Because we have used all of our cells, we've used all 22 of our cells with 22 digits, none of the quads can have repeats. I mean, they could, but they would have to be referenced by a different quad, which is not possible. So we have to be using exactly 1, 6 and 1, 7 accounted for by this quad. We've already got those in these two cells. So this can't be a 6, 7. This must belong to the 1, 3 quad. Now we have our 1 and 3 here. So this can't be a 1 or 3. It can't be a bonus. So it must belong to the 8, 9 quad. Now we have these two cells to account for. They can't belong to the 8, 9 quad. So they must belong to the 5, 6 quad. That makes this a 5, 6 pair. Therefore, this is now a 7. That's now a 6. Now because this is a 5, 6 pair, this cell can't belong to the 5, 6 quad. It must be a bonus. So it's not a 2 and it's not a 4, so that's our 1. These cells can no longer be bonus digits because they can't be 1, 2, or 4. This one is only in the 7, 9 quad, so this is 7 or 9. This is either in the 3, 8 quad or the 7, 9 quad, so this is 3, 7, 8, 9. It's not a 7 because of the 7 in this row. This is a 2, 7, or 9. And this is a 3, 8, or 9. Or a 2, because it could still be a 2 there. Okay, now let's carry on. We have a 4, 8 quad up here. Let's identify some of those digits. So this cell here can't be a 6 or 7, so it has to be either a bonus digit or something belonging to the 4, 8 quad. So it could be 1, 2, 3, or 4, or 8. However, it can't be an 8 because there's an 8, 9 pair below it. Similarly, this could be a 1, 3, or a 4, or an 8. Can't be an 8 because there isn't already an 8 present in the column. Now, this cell contains a 3, 7, 8, or 9 because it has to be referenced by one of these quads. One of these cells has to be an 8 to finish the 4, 8 quad. And neither of them can be 4, so one of these guys is going to have to be a 4. So now we have a 6 here, a bonus digit here. We need a 4 and an 8 here, and we also need to fit 2 more bonus digits in because there were 3 bonus digits, 1, 2, and 3 in these 6 cells. That accounts for all 6 of these cells. That's what tells us that none of these cells can be belonging to the 7, 9 quad, because then we would be fitting more than 6 distinct digits into just 6 cells. We have room only for a 6, a 4, 8 pair, and the 3 bonus digits 1, 2, and 3. Therefore, the 2 digits for the 7, 9 quad have to go into these 2 cells. That tells us where the 7 and 9 for this quad go immediately. They go into these 2 cells. This is now a 2. These 2 cells are 9 and 7 in that order. And the 3, 8 have to go here and here. So we now know what digits go here. These are going to be 5, 7, and 9. We also know, because we have these 2, 7, 9 pairs, that these digits are 7 and 9. That tells us that the 4 in this quad goes into one of these cells, which tells us that 4 in this quad can only go into this cell. So what are we going to put in the rest of this column? We need 3, 5, 6, and 8. The 5 and 6 have to be in these cells because of this 3, 5, 6, 8 quadruple. So we can remove 5 and 6 from here, making this a 3, 8 pair. That does a few things for us. It removes 3 and 8 from this cell and removes 3 from this cell. So we can now place our 8 in region 6. It also tells us the only 2 digits we still need to place in this region are 5 and 6. So they're going to go here and here. So the last 2 digits to place here will be 3 and 8. We need to place a 6 into one of these cells because this is a 2, 6 quad. We need to place a 2 into one of these cells. The 2 is already here, so it has to go in there or there. And 1, 4 told us that there had to be a 4 in one of those cells. Now, what else do we need to place at this point? So, there has to be a 1 in one of those cells. 2 and 4, and I'm just looking for the next step because this is a fairly long and involved solution path, even though I designed the puzzle. This column, we still need 2, 3, 6, and 8, so there's no 2 here. This column, we still need 3, 5, 4, and 8. And where is our next move? Got it. So we do need to place a 3 in this quad, which puts a 3 right here. So we're going to remove 3 from those cells. This is now an 8 and a 3, a 6 and a 2. We can remove 3 from these cells. And because we need to have both a 3 and an 8 in this quad, this is now a 3. The 3 makes this a 1 and a 3 in this order. That makes this a 1 and resolves all of these digits. So we now have our 4, 8 pair and all 3 of our bonus digits accounted for. Let's get rid of the 5 here due to the 5, 6 pair, and the 9 here and the 7 here just to keep things tidy and organized. 5 can't go there. 2 can no longer go here, so that's a 4 and a 2, and that makes this cell an 8. Now let's look at these rows. So we need to still place 4, 6, 7, and 9. This can't be a 4, that can't be a 6. And here we need to place 1, 5, 7, and 9. And this is not a 5. The 3 here eliminates 3 from these 2 cells. So we place a 3 in the 2, 3 quad right there, making this an 8. We can also now place a 3 in this region because 3 is ruled out of all of these cells. Now, 3 down here goes into this cell. 2 down here goes into this cell by Sudoku. These cells contain 5, 6, and 8. And that's not a 5, and that is not an 8. We do a bit of Sudoku up here at this point. These cells contain 3, 6, 7, and 9 in the row. We have a 3, 6, and 7 in this column already, so that now becomes a 9. That is a naked 9 in row 2, column 9. So these can't be 9, and that also can't be 3. We can eliminate 3 and 7 from this cell because they're in the column already. These cells have to contain, I believe, 2 and 5, correct? So that's a 5 and that's a 2 because there's already a 2 in row 1, and that resolves this. These are going to contain 4 and 8 in this order. These will contain 1 and 7. And this will contain 1 or 9. However, it can't be a 1 because there's a 1 in one of these 2 cells to fulfill this quad. And our last 3 cells here will contain 1, 6, and 8. This cannot be a 1 because of the quad, or an 8 because of the 8 right below it. So that's now a 6, which places a 6 in this region. The 6 gives us a 5 here. And this is now either 1 or 9. This 6 in this column gives us an 8, 1, and 8. We can now place a 1 here thanks to the 7, 9 pair, and a 5 and a 4. The 1 makes this a 9 and resolves our 7, 9 pairs. The 8 in this row makes that a 6. These cells have to contain 1 and 6, and these cells have to contain 4 and 7. And we can resolve the rest using classic Sudoku rules. So that's the puzzle. That's how you're intended to solve. And by intended, I just mean it's what I had in mind when I designed it. It's the solve path that I was working through as I was putting the puzzle together. Now, I think that... So first of all, how I designed this. So I got hung up on this visual theme before I even really fully appreciated the implications of this global break-in. I actually started setting this puzzle by playing with this visual theme and just asking myself, what is the cleanest and kind of most simplified and most reduced that I can make a layout of quadruples with kind of this basic structure of 2 rings? I was simultaneously thinking about global break-ins with quadruples involving counting cells because of another puzzle that I had solved recently where I had assumed that the break-in was going to be something along those lines and had ended up being largely incorrect, but had been so kind of taken by the idea of a global break-in using quads where you had to count non-overlapping digits that I decided, well, I'm sure it exists somewhere, but it's not the puzzle that I thought I was solving. So let's just go ahead and make it myself so I can see what it looks like and see, how plausible it is. So that is how this kind of came into being. I ended up spending a tremendous amount of time and energy and work with actually a computer solver, just showing me kind of the remaining possible candidates to get this puzzle to conform to this layout. And I suspect, like with many instances where one gets very attached to a visual layout, I probably should have killed my darlings on this one. Because I had to make some sacrifices with this puzzle in order to get the layout to resolve uniquely. I have many, many, many versions of it that have something like 3 or 6 or 8 solutions, where I liked 95% of the solve path much more than I like the path in this puzzle. And the sacrifice I ended up having to make in order to get it resolved has to do with these 5 digits that you can get very early in this puzzle. In my original versions that had, 3 or 6 or 2 or 8 different solutions and did not resolve uniquely, I was trying very hard to keep this layout while also not giving any digits early, because I find that giving a couple of easy digits early tends to be anathema to getting people in the right mindset to find a really difficult global break-in. If you give people digits from local deductions very early on, it is much harder to get them to do that kind of cognitive flip later in the solve and say, oh, wait a second, I need to start adding things together. I need to start summing. I need to start coloring regions of the grid. Than it is if you hand them something right out of the gate where they can't do anything without starting to think globally. That is not to say that there aren't any good global Sudoku that start with small local deductions. I am not saying that that's impossible or that it's bad to try to do that. I'm saying that it's hard to do that. It's hard to hand somebody 5 digits like I did here, and then somehow also signal to them without being able to use words, which would make it much easier if I could just write in the puzzle, here's how you're meant to solve this. But without being able to use words, to signal to them, now you're no longer supposed to be looking at positioning single digits. I'm now asking you to do something completely different. So unfortunately, I had to give these digits to get this thing unique. I had a number of setups, like I said, that didn't give digits early, that may have done a better job signaling that you needed to look at, for instance, like these X-wing kind of constructions to force digits down here, but that did not resolve uniquely. And that is what the majority of that kind of 40 to 60 hour number in terms of the time that I spent creating this was spent just methodically checking different possible setups and discarding ones that gave too many digits too early on. But I ended up deciding I'd rather have a puzzle that's done than a puzzle that 100% checks all the boxes for me. So let's just go ahead and allow it to give a couple of digits, as long as it gives them like kind of pretty elegantly. Let's just kind of hope that we've still signaled well enough that you're supposed to go start looking at global stuff down here. And that was not largely success. I don't know what the majority of people who solved this did, but I do know from talking to people that many people who solved this did it by continuing the theme that was started up here and just kind of testing and checking different positions for different digits. And a lot of people as solvers have a much greater capacity for doing that kind of thing and for like remembering and organizing the cases that they've tested than I do. So it is often a weakness in my puzzles that they are vulnerable to what many people would consider simple and straightforward case checking, that when I set them, my intuition was to say something like, oh, well, nobody would ever check all those cases. You know, that's 4 entire cases. How could anybody possibly keep all that organized in their head? And then it turns out everybody who solves it just casually goes through those 4 cases and says, oh, well, none of these work, so it must be this other thing. And that is a fault in many of my puzzles, I think, that is also present in this one. So I guess the takeaway there is I think that the first barrier to this puzzle's success was being too beholden to a visual theme. It was my hope, though, that having these digits be all distinct from each other would stand out visually. I'm not totally convinced that it does. It is something I think I would have eventually noticed if I was solving this as a solver from scratch, that the digits in adjacent quads never were equal to each other. I don't know whether or not I would have picked up on how that was intended to play into the solution. I think that the fact that I ended up having to use matching 7 9s may also have introduced a red herring into the puzzle. People may have kind of overestimated the significance of those 2 clues. They do end up being significant later in the solve path, but they're not particularly significant to the break-in. I did really take pains to place these all in such a way that you don't get any extra digits early on from like setting up X. Like say we put the one with 3 down here, and then we had 2 with 3s up here. And then we could get like an extra sneaky 3 from like overlapping 2 X-wings. I did do some work to keep that from happening, just because I have had other puzzles destroyed by like inadvertently leading people to make the assumption that the puzzle was really all about finding really sneaky, well-hidden classic Sudoku deductions. And I had kind of forgotten to proof it against that. When in reality it was supposed to be about something completely different. So, in the end, I'm delighted with this puzzle. I got a lot of satisfaction out of really seeing this through to the end and sticking with it to construct something that had this visual theme without compromising, just to kind of get it out there. Of course, I did make some compromises, but I didn't end up having to make compromises on the theme. We still have that structure with the 2 rings. We still have the global break-in. It was pretty painful to create, and I think that I'm not sure that I could necessarily do a better job combining this style of break-in with this particular visual theme. And in that sense, I think the puzzle is just kind of fundamentally flawed. Maybe in the hands of somebody more talented or more experienced than me, it would have ended up as a more quote-unquote readable puzzle. That said, many people did solve it, many people did enjoy it, and I'm very, very grateful for that. And I'm grateful for all of the folks who solved it in a way that I did not have in mind when I put it together, and also for all of the folks who attempted to solve it and did not particularly enjoy it, because you guys taught me a lot too. I'm always grateful for those experiences. I'm putting a solving link in the description of this video, so please feel free to check it out yourself if you want to play with this. I hope that you enjoyed hearing a little bit about my process and about this puzzle, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks for watching.